Just yesterday, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin held a testimony where he mentioned there would be big news when it came to renters and President Trump's executive order on rent moratoriums. So in this video, we're going to break down the news here and everything you need to know about this creative solution. And just for some context here, President Trump made 4 executive orders a few weeks back, one of which addressed rental assistance. Well, kind of. The CARES Act originally imposed 2 things on this topic. It suspended foreclosures for federally backed mortgages for 60 days, which was then later extended to August 31st, 2020, and it placed a moratorium on evictions for renters, which has since expired as well. The Trump administration said they recognize that people losing their homes may directly increase the number of virus cases, citing that homeless shelters have been proven to be especially susceptible to virus outbreaks. Now, this originally didn't mean much to me when I read it a few weeks ago when those executive orders first came out. But you'll see in a minute that it was actually a very important part of getting a solution passed. What was curious about his executive order on this is it didn't explicitly halt evictions for renters, but instead called upon the Secretary of Treasury and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development to try and allocate any available federal funding towards financial assistance for renters and homeowners who are in a difficult situation due to the pandemic that we're in the middle of. No one, including myself, were really holding their breath on this. It kind of seemed like some kind of PR stunt just to make it seem like they're doing something, when in reality it was like, hey, check into this and maybe everyone will forget about it. I mean, it just gave so few specifics regarding how the funds would be administered or what kind of funding is actually available for something like this. Are we talking about rent assistance? Are we talking about cancellation of rents and mortgages? Are we talking about landlord assistance? The expectations were low. We really didn't know what to expect, and we kind of all seemed to set the bar really low here. So back to Mnuchin and present day. He said, expect some big news when after the market closes, and we have it. Yesterday, the Trump administration released this order through the CDC titled Temporary Halt in Residential Evictions to Prevent the Further Spread of COVID-19. You heard it right, the Center of Disease Control. This order uses public health and safety laws to creatively pass a moratorium, bypassing the normal route to get something like this in law. Here's the summary on the beginning of this order. It says, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, located within the Department of Health and Human Services, announces the issuance of an order under Section 316 of the Public Health Service Act to temporarily halt residential evictions to prevent the further spread of COVID-19. So this order then goes on to say this virus causes a historic threat to public health and many safety practices have already been implemented, including things like social distancing and wearing masks. But one major unaddressed threat is homelessness and the transmission of disease. And because of this, the order states a landlord, owner of residential property, or other person with legal right to pursue eviction shall not evict any covered person from any residential property in any jurisdiction to which this order applies during the effective period of the order, which is until the end of December 2020. It's also important to note that this moratorium does not supersede any moratorium that offers a greater level of protection. So if you live in a city or state that already has something enforced that is a better deal than this, you don't have to worry that it will be lessened. I don't believe this is the case for many areas, though. Now, on to who this order applies to, because not absolutely anyone can get this assistance. It doesn't apply to absolutely everyone, and here are the guidelines. A landlord cannot evict a tenant unless the following 5 items are true. First, the renter has already used their best efforts to obtain all available government assistance for rent or housing. This could be state, local, or federal assistance. I'm not a big fan of the wording best efforts because it's really up to interpretation, and this does matter because it could be the determining factor whether a court decides someone can be evicted or not. Remember, this program is not a program where anyone and everyone can decide to just stop paying rent, but I'll get more into that later. Second, the renter must certify that they expect to earn less than $99,000 in income for 2020 for single filers or $198,000 in income in 2020 for joint filers, or they can show that they received a stimulus check this year as proof. So if you did get a stimulus check, you're good to go on rule number 2. Number 3, the renter must be unable to make a full housing payment due to significant loss of household income, loss of hours, or extraordinary out-of-pocket medical expenses. There's no definition here of what extraordinary means. However, if you lost your job and you got a new one with comparable pay, you would be excluded from this program. Or if you kept your job and the level of pay, you can't just decide to stop paying rent. Fourth, the renter must be using their best efforts to make partial payments of rent as close to full payments as possible, taking into account the individual situation. They're basically saying if you earn 10% less, that doesn't mean you can just stop paying rent completely. You must still pay what you can, and in reality, this is in your best interest. After all, rent is not completely forgiven. This is a moratorium on rents, so you are still legally obligated to pay back your rents at a later date. Then finally, fifth, it must be provable that an eviction would likely render a tenant homeless or force the tenant to live in close quarters in a shared living environment. So that's really all the rules that a renter must certify. You can see that they're pretty careful to attempt to reduce the abuse of this program. However, I still have some major concerns here. I have a little bit of an unpopular opinion. I think this program is the right thing to do, absolutely. But I believe this will hurt small-time landlords. Before you get mad, just let me explain the logic here. Listen to it and then decide if you still want to get mad at me about it. Not all landlords are these filthy rich capitalists looking to hold down the little guy and force him to pay rents and whatever. Many landlords have 1 or 2 rental properties and still work a full-time job. They're more similar to just an everyday person than some filthy rich person. These landlords may have an additional 4 months now where they receive no rent but still have a mortgage to pay. And if you have a rental property with a mortgage, you'll know there's very little profits after that mortgage payment. My house payment is $2,300 a month, and I could probably rent it out for $2,700 a month. Yes, tenants are obligated to pay back landlords at a later date, but how on earth is someone going to pay back 4 months of rent when it's tough to pay 1 right now? It just doesn't seem feasible. A landlord can take a tenant to court and they will win if payment is due, but if the tenant has no money, there's no money for the landlord to receive after court. There's always an issue when an order is in place to help one side of a transaction and not the other. This order kind of addresses this by also putting a forbearance on federally backed mortgages, so some landlords will be okay, but not all. It's kind of like if you had an ice cream shop and the government said, people need food, so you need to give them free ice cream through the end of the year, and they'll pay you back after year end. There should be support for both sides of the transaction is all I'm saying. And just to clarify, I think this order is a great idea, and it's something that needed to be done. We don't want families out on the street. We don't want people getting sick. All I'm saying is help out both sides of the transaction. Really, this just shows that Congress needs to keep working to make a funding bill to both help with rent assistance and landlord assistance. From here, let's talk a little on the legality of the CDC to make this order. I saw mention of it, so I want to do a little bit of research just to make this video as comprehensive as possible. The order was made under this federal law, intended to give the CDC authority to impose measures to prevent the spread of disease. Here's the exact language from this law. It says, the director may take such measures to prevent such spread of diseases as he/she deems reasonably necessary, including the inspection, fumigation, disinfection, sanitation, pest extermination, and destruction of animals or articles believed to be sources of infections. So, as you can see, including rent moratoriums may be considered a bit of a stretch in the law here, and some have said it may not hold up because of this. However, my thoughts are, who's going to argue with this or try to shoot it down? Democrats want rent assistance, Republicans want rent assistance. I don't think it's going anywhere. So this is all we have for today. Consider subscribing if you appreciate me reading legal documents to get you the most accurate information possible. And until next time, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.